Hello again, this is Unit 12, Lesson 4, and we are factoring quadratics. And your objective is there, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, this example says to use the discriminant to tell if the trinomial can be factored. Okay, now factoring is just a different method that we can use to solve a quadratic. So we have learned two methods already. Okay, we have learned that we can use the graph this quadratic. Okay, and we can graph it and make a parabola and find the roots, or we can use the quadratic formula, the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now we're telling you there's a third method called factoring, and factoring, if it can be done, is usually the easiest method, okay, or the quickest method once you get it down. So it's a good method to know. But a trinomial can only be factored if the discriminant is a perfect square. Okay, I mean, if we do the discriminant, we get numbers such as 25 or 36 or 49, something we could find the square root of. Okay, so first thing we have to remember is the discriminant, b squared minus 4 times a times c. And in this trinomial, my a is 1, my b is 3, and my c is negative 4. So we're going to plug this in and see if we can even factor it to start with. So we've got 3 squared minus 4 times a times c. 3 squared is 9, minus 4 times 1 is 4, and 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. 9 minus negative 16 changes to 9 plus 16, and that equals 25. Okay, well, since that's a perfect square number, I know how to find the square root of that, then I could go ahead and factor this. Okay, and again, it's a good method to use because it's quicker, and I think a lot of you will like it better. So let's go ahead and move on now and learn how to factor. Okay, right here are all of our steps to factoring. Okay, so you'll see the very first thing we do is make sure it's in standard form first. Alright, and then we've got all this kind of method, steps to solving equations. So we have these 4 steps right here are to factor, and then after that, these 2 steps are how to solve it. Okay, so get all those written down, and then let's go ahead and move on, and we'll show you how they work in a few examples. Okay, so this one says to factor x squared plus 3x plus 2 using the grouping method. Okay, so the first method we're going to show you is grouping. The second one we're going to show you is the box method. You can use whichever one you want, okay? I just want you to make sure that you know both methods and use the one that works the best for you. Okay, so we'll do this one by grouping. So the first thing, step 1, said to write the quadratic in standard form, which it already is, but we'll go ahead and set it equal to 0, just so that we remember that that's what standard form really means. Okay, the very first thing that we need to make sure we know is what's A, and what's B, and what's C. Okay, well A is 1, B is 3, and C is 2. Okay, so step 2 says to multiply A times C. Okay, so A times C, well, I've got 1 times 2, so my A times my C is 2. Step 3 now is to find factors of A times C that add up to B. So I want to find factors of AC, and they have to end up adding up to B. Well, the first thing I want to know is what are the factors of AC? Well, the factors of positive 2, I can take 1 times 2, or I could also take negative 1 times negative 2. Okay? Well, I want to find the factors that are going to add up to B. So which of these 2 sets of factors, since those are the only ones that are factors of 2, add up to positive 3? And the answer is going to be 1 and 2. Okay, because 1 plus 2 is 3. Okay? Now, my next step is to go ahead and factor the expression using the group method or the box method. Okay, so we're using the grouping method here. Okay, and how I'm going to do the grouping method is essentially what I've done with these factors is I'm going to use these to break apart my 3x. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this as x squared plus, instead of 3x, I'm going to use my 2 factors of A times C. So I'm going to put plus 1x plus 2x, and then I'm going to throw on at the end plus 2. Okay, so again, I've used my factors of a times c, my 1 and 2, that add up to the middle one, and just broken it apart. So instead of 3x, it's 1x plus 2x. Now I'm going to group those. Okay, so I'm going to group the first two together. Okay, and group the second two together. Okay, now once I've grouped those together, I'm going to take the greatest common factor out of each one of these. Okay, so the greatest common factor of x squared and 1x is just x. I'm going to factor that, so now inside the parentheses I'm going to ask myself, x times what gives me x squared? Well, that's 1x. Plus x times what gives me 1x? And that's 1. Okay, so if I were to distribute this out, I would get x squared plus 1x. Okay, I got a plus sign here. And I'm going to do the same thing to this one now. I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor of 2x and 2. And the greatest common factor, that is 2. Again, I want to ask myself, 2 times what gives me 2x? Well, that's 1x. Plus 2 times what gives me 2? 1. Now notice what happened here. Okay, I got the same binomial when I factored this completely. That should always happen if you've done this correctly. Okay, you should have something outside the binomials, but the numbers inside the binomial should be the exact same. Okay, those terms are the exact same. So now what that does is that tells me what my factors are. I'm going to take the stuff outside the binomials, x plus 2, and that's one of my factors. So I'm going to combine that into a factor. And then my other factor is what's inside the binomials, 1x plus 1, or just x plus 1. And there's my factors. Okay, this binomial is the same as, it can be factored and say x plus 2 times x plus 1. Alright? Well, after that, to solve this, all I need to do is set these factors equal to 0. So I'm going to take each factor and set it equal to 0. So I'm going to say x plus 2 equals 0, and go over here and say x plus 1 equals 0, since the whole quadratic was set equal to 0. And I'm just going to solve those equations. So x equals -2 and x equals -1. And those are my solutions. So my solutions to this quadratic are x equals -2 and -1. Okay? Now that first example seems kind of long and drawn out a little bit because, it took some time to explain it, but I promise you that once you get started on these, okay, this is going to be a method that you will like to use, okay, or a lot of people will anyway. I personally like it the best, much better than graphing, obviously, and I like it better than the quadratic formula as well. Alright, so let's go ahead with, we got a few more examples yet.